Hi everyone, Akeem, Fernando, Kathleen, Celso, Valeska, Alexis, and Joshua. This is notes number 9 with Miss S. So what we're going to learn in these notes is we're going to talk a little bit about the nervous system. So we're going to be identifying a neuron and explain how it works. We're also going to be looking at how hormones communicate with the body as well as the nervous system. And then we're going to take a little diversion into the muscular skeletal system. So we're going to look at the 3 types of muscle tissue, and we're going to look at bones, cartilage, ligaments, and tendons. So let's get started. The nervous system is responsible for recognizing and coordinating the body's responses to changes in its internal and external environment. So that means when anything's changing inside of our body or on the outside, our nervous system is how we respond to those changes. So if I put my hand over a hot stove, my nervous system is going to detect that change in temperature and send a signal so that my hand can move quickly away from the stove. So it's going to first have to collect and interpret that information and then coordinate a response to that information. So again, collecting the information and then coordinating a response. This is important for all the things we do, how we brush our hair, how we take a sip of coffee, how we're moving, if we have a fever, and how that's going to change in our body. The neuron is the functional unit of the nervous system. So a neuron is a type of cell, and it's the type of cell that makes up the nervous system. So it contains a cell body, which is where the nucleus and all the organelles are going to be, like the mitochondria and the Golgi apparatus and the endoplasmic reticulum. So an easy way to remember that is that it's where everything in a normal cell would be located, the cell body. What makes a neuron different from other cells is that it has processes or extensions from the cell body. So it's basically like little fingers coming off of a cell. And these are going to receive or send electrical currents. So remember, we're talking about the nervous system here. The information is going to be sent through electrical currents. There's 2 types of extensions because we need one that is going to receive information and one that is going to send information. Dendrites are receiving information. So they are the ones that are going to detect the change in temperature when you have your hand over a stove. And the ones that are going to send the information away so that it can be carried out are called axons. And the way I remember that is A for axons, A for away. Just like A for arteries, A for away, here we have another A for away. So let's take a look at what a neuron actually looks like since we've been talking about the structure. Here's the neuron structure, and here you can see the cell body. And it has the nucleus here, and all the other organelles aren't shown, but they're in here, like the mitochondria and ribosomes. And then we have our 2 types of extensions. We have on one side our dendrites, and these are going to receive the information. And then we have an axon, which is going to send the information away. So some information will be coming this way and traveling through the neuron towards the end. Okay, and this would be connected to yet another neuron, okay, because these are the smallest unit of the nervous system. This is a type of cell. So obviously our nervous system has many, many, many of these. Okay, we're not going to go over exactly what the myelin sheath and the nodes are, but basically, to sum it up, these help the current to travel faster through here. So instead of going through the whole thing, they jump from node to node so that they can travel more quickly and whatever needs to be done can be carried out more quickly. So neurons are actually going to communicate with each other through the synapse. So yes, you have the electrical current running through that neuron that we just looked at, but when we have a gap between a neuron and another neuron, we can't carry that electrical signal. What happens is that chemicals called neurotransmitters are going to stimulate electrical impulses. And this takes a very short amount of time. It takes about a fraction of a second to occur. So if we have a neuron and we have another neuron, let me get a pointer on so this is a little easier to see. So here, if we have a neuron that we just looked at and it was going this way, and it would have to connect to another neuron. This space right here is called the synapse. So think of space, think of synapse. Okay? And what would happen is when the electrical signal travels through, when it gets to here, little chemicals called neurotransmitters, we usually represent them with just tiny little ball-shaped things, are going to be released and sent to the other side. And once they connect with the other side, then the signal can keep going to the next neuron and to the next neuron and to the next neuron. So this is how they communicate with each other. So neurons are going to be found throughout our body, and they're found in bundles called nerves. Okay, so neurons are the smallest unit, they're the type of cell, and when we have a bunch of cells, they're called nerves. So we have nerves running everywhere because we need to respond to all aspects of our body. And again, these are going to be electrical impulses, and they're going to stimulate all other body systems to do their normal work. So it's our nervous system that sends the information to our digestive system, to release certain enzymes, to our respiratory system to regulate our breathing, and so forth. The nervous system is therefore going to detect changes and make the appropriate adjustments. So not only is it external, but internal. So if I have a fever, my body is going to send a signal to areas of my brain that are going to lower the temperature of my body. And the nervous system also works closely with what is called the endocrine system. And we're going to look briefly at the endocrine system today. But what the endocrine system does is it releases hormones. So these are chemical messengers that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So the human body is going to communicate in various ways. We've already talked about the nervous system and how they're going to use electrochemical signals. But the circulatory system is also important because the circulatory system, as we know, consists of the blood vessels, and heart. So these are going to be delivering substances to different areas of the body. Like that open response that we did, the circulatory system has to carry oxygen to our muscle cells through the capillaries. But the circulatory system is also going to be carrying nutrients from our digestive system, waste like CO2, and toxins to our kidneys and liver to be removed, obviously oxygen to our cells, and they're also going to be circulating hormones in our body to regulate things. So all of our systems really work together to maintain homeostasis. And if you remember, homeostasis means to stay the same, to maintain a stable internal environment. Remember that homo or homeo means the same, and stasis means still. So it means to stay the same or to stay still. So hormones, we talked about just a little bit. They're part of the endocrine system, and what they are they're chemical messengers that are going to communicate between body systems. They're produced by glands of the endocrine system. These are found throughout our body, but mostly in our brain. And hormones are going to travel in the blood. Like we talked about before, they have to use the circulatory system. But they're going to be traveling to specific target cells. They're not just going to go everywhere. They have specific areas where they are going to target and make those cells perform a certain function. And hormones can take hours or days to take effect, depending on the hormone. And hormones are controlled by what's called feedback inhibition. We talked about this a little bit earlier about how the stimulus is going to cause a change in the body, and once that change occurs, then that mechanism is going to shut off, like the thermostat that we talked about in class. Now, changing course a little bit, we're going to move on to the muscular skeletal system. Now, this guy is obviously a dramatic view of the muscular system. But let's take a look at what the functions of both the muscles and the skeletal system do. One, they protect our internal organs. Think about our rib cage and how it protects our heart and our lungs. Movement and support of our body. We would just be a pile of mush if we didn't have bones and muscles to support us, and we wouldn't be able to move without these both working together. Third, storage of minerals, which you might not think of, but bones actually store calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, and many other minerals. And blood cell production. In our bones, we have red bone marrow, which is going to produce our blood cells like our red blood cells that carry oxygen with the molecule hemoglobin. So let's take a look at the different types of muscles first. There are 3 types of muscles found in the human body. They are skeletal, which are attached to our bones, hence the word skeletal, skeleton. Cardiac, which is found in our heart. Think of a cardiac arrest. And smooth, which is found lining our internal organs. We're going to learn a little bit more detail about each of these since I think it was 2 years ago they had an open response on the 3 types of muscle tissues. First, the skeletal system. This is considered voluntary muscle. This is the only voluntary muscle because you control it. So think of if you volunteer for something, you are deciding to participate in something. Voluntary means that you control it. It's called skeletal muscle because they're connected to the bones of the skeleton. They are attached to bones by tendons. Muscles have to contract and relax in order for movement to occur. That means they have to shorten and then go back to their normal length. So think of doing curls at the gym. When you're curling, your bicep is contracting and your triceps are relaxing. So muscles are going to work in pairs to help for movement. Smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is found in many internal organs, specifically the digestive tract and the diaphragm, which if you remember, the diaphragm is the muscle that is right below the lungs, and this is going to expand or contract to help push air out of the lungs or to fill our lungs with air. So some of our digestive tract, if you remember, is the large intestine. This is the large intestine right here, and this is all lined with smooth muscle. And these are responsible for involuntary functions. So remember, skeletal is voluntary. If we have in, it means the opposite. So this means that this is under unconscious movement. It means that you don't have to think about it. I don't have to think about breathing or think about my food running through my large intestine. I don't control that consciously. It's unconscious. So it's called involuntary. Some other examples of unconscious movements are peristalsis in esophagus. Remember, this is how food moves through the esophagus down into our stomach. And the blinking of the eyes. We blink all the time, but we're not conscious of it. Obviously, some of it is conscious, since I can blink my eyes while thinking about it, but most of it is unconscious. And last but not least, cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is only found in the heart. It is also involuntary because you're not thinking about your heart beating. Every time it contracts on its own, your heart beats. And finally, bone. Bone is considered living cells because they have a constant blood supply and they are growing and developing. You are constantly replacing your bone cells with storage of minerals and making new organelles. There are 2 different types of bone tissue. There's compact bone, which is hard and dense, and this is what surrounds the layer of bone. It's the outer layer of bone. So this is completely solid. But it doesn't make up most of our bone, otherwise our bones would be way too heavy for us to move. So it only gives protection to the outside of the bone. The other type is called spongy bone. Spongy bone is more lightweight and strong. It's not soft, but what it has is it basically is like a spider web. There's overlapping materials that allow for great strength, but it's also lightweight. So spongy bone is the inner layer of bone that you see here, which looks like a sponge that you would find in your sink. Okay, so just the outer layer is compact bone, and compact bone is also the storage site for minerals like calcium. This is where those things are stored. Where two bones meet is called a joint. So if I believe this is your femur, which is your thigh. So if you were to connect that to your lower 2 bones of your leg, your tibia and your fibula, where these 2 bones meet is called a joint. And what holds these 2 bones together is called a ligament. So the difference between a ligament and a tendon that we looked at before is a ligament holds bone to bone, and a tendon holds bone to muscle. And last but not least, bone marrow. There are two types of bone marrow, and they are found in the internal part of a bone. Let's just take a look and go back and see where the bone marrow would be in this bone. Bone marrow is found right here. There's this hollow cavity in the middle of the bone where we're going to find our two types of bone marrow. There is red and yellow bone marrow. Red bone marrow is where many blood cells are made, specifically red blood cells, some white blood cells, and platelets. Think red for red blood cells. And yellow bone marrow. Yellow bone marrow is made up of fat cells. Think yellow for fat. And that concludes notes number 9. Please fill out the review sheet and practice MCAS questions, then move on to notes number 10 for the holiday vacation. Thank you. Bye!